We just lost a real red shirt. R.I.P. Eddie Paskey. Today on Trekland Tuesdays Live, pay no attention to the Monday. It really is Tuesday. Trekland Tuesdays Live, number 221, with me, Dr. Trek, Larry Nemechek, coming to you right here from the heart of Trekland through Portal 47 and everything Trekland. Hopefully we'll have a little clarity, sanity, and the big picture in all things Star Trek this week. Hey, you ever have one of those days? One of those days when, the things that you feel like the gremlins picked up something and walked off with it. And it's really just your fault after all. Anyway, glad to be here with you finally. Glad that you could be with us for another Tuesday. If you're new to Trekland Tuesdays Live, hey, we've got a wonderful TTLers community here in the chat. Jump in and say hi. I want to talk about my topic of the week, our little soapbox here, and some other fun stuff, much less the chat with everybody coming. But I've had a week to recover. Hopefully my voice is a little bit improved from a week ago. A week since Star Trek Las Vegas. So much stuff has happened. I haven't stopped moving. I've had tons of work. And one thing that we had in the week after Vegas, which always happens, but it was so much bigger this year, I talked about a little last week, was Gene Roddenberry's 100th birthday. Now, it feels like COVID has robbed us of so much attention span. We really didn't get to celebrate Gene's 100th anniversary. And when I say celebrate Gene, I don't mean put him up on a pedestal and worship from afar. Lots of great events, lots of online events, programs, panels, talked about some of them last week, have been marking Gene's birthday. And of course, on a centennial, you tend to look at the legacy of why we're even remembering someone or something. It's worth it. What's amazing is you forget until we get back into it what a cluster of Star Trek birthdays just mid-April or mid-August tends to be. Right before Gene's birthday is B. Joe Trimble's birthday. And some of these got kind of shadowed, they kind of overshadowed, drowned out in the glare of Star Trek Las Vegas happening, and then Gene's birthday. But just on Gene's own birthday, it's always also Jonathan Frakes' birthday. A couple of weeks, I keep forgetting, it was Bob Blackman's birthday, the wonderful costume designer who came in mid Next Generation and was the designer. It's his looks that are all through all the Bourbon era shows after that. August 19th is also Kerry O'Quinn's birthday, who, not specifically with Star Trek, was the original editor and publisher there, outward-facing publisher-editor of Starlog magazine in its heyday. Used to write the opening greetings and inspirational pieces in the magazine. He will be part of the Con of Wrath. He was part of the original Ultimate Fantasy show, and he's very much in the documentary. And those were all just on the 19th, August 19th, sharing a day with Gene. And and we have Star Trek birthdays all through the year. It's always amazing to me. You come out of Trek Vegas and bang, here's Gene's birthday, and a lot of other people who are key to Star Trek. And if you're in the habit of marking the Star Trek birthdays, that's a busy week. They're unending. After 55 years, there's a birthday almost every day, But lost, in a way, some of you saw this, but overshadowed between Trek Vegas and Gene's centennial and all the other dates and all the other news happening. Yes, we just lost a real red shirt. Only now. He was a survivor. But Eddie Paskey. Now, longtime fans will know this, because back when there were only 80 shows, you think the recent Lower Decks was running your hand crazy with a freeze frame pause, muscular contractions. Kayshawn, his eyes opened, his freeze frame hand frozen. When there were only 80 episodes, Eddie Paskey was a standout because no one could get through, really, what was it, 3/4 of the show, the series, without seeing his Mr. Leslie all through. Yes, it's true that one of the first times his background extra crewman seen all the time was called Connors by McCoy early on. But he very soon, his red shirt character, although the first time you see Eddie, he is a security guard, but he's wearing blue on the surface of Delta Vega in the second pilot. Most of the time he was in red, and he was Mr. Leslie or Lieutenant Leslie or Crewman Leslie, depending on what shirt he was wearing. But Eddie was just ubiquitous. It was Eddie to me, and he passed, by the way. Eddie passed on the 17th, August 17th. He was 4 days shy of his 82nd birthday. His story is so amazing. It's a little bit like old Hollywood. He was an aspiring actor. He wasn't an actor, but there's a lot of openings. If you saw Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, it's that evocative era when you could be out there gunning for acting jobs. You had the square-jawed, thick, brown, curly-haired look like you were made for camera. But on the weekends, what was your day job? He loved cars. He was a car guy, and he worked at a gas station, service station in the Palisades, in Pacific Palisades. That's where not just Herb Solow saw him from Desilu, and not just Star Trek, but other shows too. But producers of Then Came Bronson, he was picked up and seen and used as an extra, glorified extra, maybe a line or two here or there. He had been in some one-off shows. He had been in a Lucy show, as well as some others, A Mission Impossible at Desilu. He credits Greg Peters, the unit production manager, as actually getting him onto Star Trek, not so much Herb Solow, but he worked on all their cars. And then he worked on cars at the motor pool at Desilu. Look, you can find a lot about Eddie online. He did eventually get to the convention circuit, where a lot of his tales were told. What's funny about Eddie, what the fans had already picked up on, was that he was a survivor red shirt. He never got killed off until Obsession, and he was one of the Vampire Clouds casualties. And then here he is in the very next show, back up in his red shirt again. And of course, fans picked up on that. There were only 80 hours to do for 20 years, guys. And he had a story. He said that there had been lines in a draft script about all of those red shirts, all those security guards being brought back to life after the Vampire Cloud had been dealt with. And something about why it wasn't filmed, I don't know. Well, yes, Ralph Sininsky was the director of Obsession. This whole thing about, well, it was in a script and it wasn't filmed, that's a whole spectrum between it was in a first draft that 5 people saw and no one ever again, all the way down to, yes, it was in the script, survived, and we just flat ran out of time, or it was filmed and cut for time. Well, it never got that far enough along. But we got to retcon Mr. Leslie being around somehow, and so that was Eddie doing his bit to keep it there. What really did him in, though, and he'll talk about this too, he had an early injury where the arc lights, the old heavy, big, bright lights they used on the sets in those days, it's like the downside of success. He was so useful because he was originally hired as a stand-in for Shatner. He was Shatner's stand-in. Frank DeVicci was Leonard Nimoy's stand-in, and Billy Blackburn, Lieutenant Gooseneck, I always called him, was D. Kelly's stand-in. And they would be hand doubles too. If they needed an insert of pushing a button or whatever, pointing at something. And since Jimmy Doohan had his infamously lost finger from his D-Day excursion, Jimmy did not like he always tried to hide that, right? Because it was, oh my God, I wouldn't get hired if people knew I had an imperfect hand. It's such a 60s attitude, but it was real. So not only did Eddie hand double for Bill Shatner, he hand doubled for Jimmy Doohan too, all the times that they wanted full hand. He was just what you call a utility player. We knew it because we could see him on screen all the time. And yeah, there's a hierarchical thing of on-screen extras. Do you get hired one day and you're in the background? If you're a crew person, that's awesome. If you can wear a uniform and they fit one to you, or if you're an alien and they've got prosthetics or a headpiece that fits you, well, they'd rather have you come. They've done that work. They'd rather have you come back and wear the same thing over and over than go out and worry about pieces that don't fit someone else, or a shirt or a dress that doesn't fit someone else. And if you don't mess up, if you can hit your marks, if you can take direction, if you can walk the right way down a corridor in the background, hey, you have a spot on the Starship Enterprise almost any day. Just don't mess up. And Eddie didn't mess up for the most part. Now, there are those times, like in Naked Time, when he actually gets a line or two. There were times up until that time when an extra might get a line, and it wouldn't be dubbed in off camera by a voiceover actor in post, a totally different voice connected to that body. If they let the actor in the moment do it, and maybe pay him a few extra bucks for that day. Maybe it gets them a SAG card. Maybe they get out of the old Screen Extras Union and they get over into a Screen Actors Guild. But yeah, famously, I think most of us know that watched Naked Time, the original series episode, he's at the helm. He's not security guarding. In the early days, you might find him in any color shirt, but even in a red shirt, he's at the helm and he has a couple of lines. And the story he famously tells that he was so nervous. He was so nervous that he had lines even if they're just Helmut's not responding, that he froze up. And in the shoot world, that was a complicated show, and they were young. They were only 4 or 5 shows in after the pilots, and to save the shot, he talks about Leonard jumping down there. It's very realistic because they're in a crisis, and Leslie freezes up a little bit, and Spock runs down to save the day, push the right buttons, and says the line of dialogue, the exposition that they need. You know, Eddie he did acting lessons. He studied acting. He had bit parts in other shows. He's also the one that actually declared, in a much better performance, in line to be beamed out, to beam themselves down as part of the Spores influence in This Side of Paradise. He's the one that looks Kirk straight in the eye when Kirk says, "This is mutiny, mister." And he says, "Yes, it is, sir." So he can pull it off. But all of that ended 3rd season in the infamous scene, Is There in Truth No Beauty? Spock's wearing the red visor to protect himself against Kolos, the Medusan. Hey, Medusans are back. Thank you, Prodigy. Spock, on his second go-round mind melding with Kolos, he forgets to put the visor on. Oh, Spock, the one time you make a mistake. And has a berserk moment, right? He has a crazy moment, goes mad by seeing the Medusan unshielded. And as he's flinging people around the bridge, Eddie is now Eddie was not a stunt person, but he could do most of what was called for. He could do a drop, he could do a roll. In this case, they've got it quasi choreographed, and he's standing there and gets tossed aside by Leonard or his stunt double. But in this case, he does a roll over a railing and lands funny on his back and hurts his back, to the point where he has to give all this up and go do some therapy. And between that and getting cluster headaches from the arc lights from an older injury, that was Eddie's last voyage. What no alien beast could do to that red shirt, just some simple onset accidental work injuries and a cumulative injury did to Eddie. Now, he came back a few years later, wanted to get into acting, didn't make a go of it. He thought about even coming in the nostalgia wave of the motion picture. Hey, the gang's all back together. He decided not to. Now, there's a lot of Eddie stories that are out there. He was at conventions starting in the 90s. He got back in touch when late, great Richard Arnold was doing so much guest coordination for the European cons and for Creation at the old Grand Slams. His first one, he came out of the woodwork, supposedly, and he made himself known. He was instantly on the circuit, telling stories, would be in panels by himself or with other original series extras and guest stars. But the very first time he was on stage back at a convention, he went by just for a few minutes to say hi to Shatner. Richard brought him over, and Shatner's handler was sitting there, and Eddie walked up to Shatner. Bill looks up and sees him and says, "Oh my gosh, it's Eddie. Look, it's my friend Eddie." And Eddie Paskey talks about that moment. That was his welcome to conventions, which was a nice touch. He said he was his stand-in, right, for lighting tests and the crews. George Murhoff was the head gaffer. He talks about how one of the reasons Leslie stood out from the other extras was because they liked him, and George Murhoff, the head gaffer, would light him. He'd give him a key light and a hair light and the whole bit. So he was like a little TLC. When you see some of these extras behind the scenes rise up to prominence of being on screen all the time, and then even get a name, be named as a crewman, oh, that's the ultimate. Oh my God. And then to get a first name on top of your last name, which Mr. Leslie never did. I'm totally convinced to call him. I'm fine with calling him Edward Leslie. Eddie Leslie, that's a little honorarium that sometimes extras get. Just use their first name. Just like actors, their characters, just use their birthday for the character's birthday. So that's, they were reasons they liked him. He was good. He was on time. He hit his marks. He did his thing. Sure, maybe that one time he flubbed a line or two, but hey, it was all fine. He was there until he could no longer be there. And as long as he was on the fan circuit, on the conventions, he had a good audience. Now I'm thinking, I think the last time I said hi to him was in 2016 at the 50th at Vegas. What's weird is I feel like I've interviewed Eddie myself. I've talked to him on the phone. We've chatted live. I never actually had a sit-down interview. And I realized what excuse me is in Communicator 143, the great Jeff Bond, my friend, interviewed Eddie. Here's the spread. King of the red shirts. Isn't that awesome? Eddie shared an awful lot of private pictures, personal pictures, when they were on location. It was always easier to have a camera on location, which existed in the 80s and 90s. Some of the best shots you see of backstage before cell phone cams were on location because everything was a little freer and loosier-goosier. And you got great shots like of the actors like that, and Eddie with his own bits there. And some of these stories I'm telling you are out there in Wikipedia Memory Alpha. They're out there in the record. And some of them were some stories and insights, including that bit about lighting that he told Jeff for this interview. And when you're editor, the cream of the crop is that you don't have to do all the work, but you get to come in and you get to lick the icing at the end. You get to pull the cherry off the top. So dealing with Eddie and his photos. Don't ever forget, folks, also, that once Eddie was actually in the captain's chair there, see? Lieutenant Leslie, I should say. Mr. Leslie was. He's a lieutenant here, apparently. It would come back and forth according to which shirt was at the laundry, maybe. He had a really good run on Star Trek, as well as the other shows that laid into it. He corrects the record about it wasn't Herb Solo that actually put him on Star Trek. It was Greg Peters. But he had a wonderful wife, 4 kids. When he could not do acting, when Hollywood looked the other way, he, of course, ran an auto body shop, auto air conditioning, in fact, for years and years and years in the Santa Monica area, and retired down south. Not sure about the exact cause of death. Our friends at Star Trek Set Tour that had him, I think, posted it first on socials a few days ago. It's been a week now. But yes, our hearts and our thoughts go out to Eddie's wife and family and all the survivors in the family. And he was kind of the first unheralded big-time extra that we've seen so many other examples of. Just as much fun for fans to spot, find the inconsistencies, retcon the why are they back alive again? Why was he in command division for 2 days here in this one episode? But Eddie, a good guy. And yeah, James Cawley and the group in the pilot, the very first Star Trek Phase 2 fan film, in their pilot called Come What May, they had Eddie on view screen as Admiral Leslie, so that in the same time frame of the 2260s in the Kirk era, he's playing his father, basically, which was a lot of fun to do. So, yeah, hats off. In the blur of everything going on last week, hats off to Eddie Paskey. The red shirt that survived, even when he was killed off. In fact, Eddie said one time he survived because he was in good enough with the crew that he would take a look at scripts. And when he saw red shirt deaths coming, he just made it a point to be somewhere else. Yeah, we can use you, and you. Come on. The day ahead of time. His luck ran out with Obsession, or did it? Apparently not. No. His luck ran out with a certain angry Medusan body hijacking. But even then, he lived to tell the tale, literally, at conventions and for fans for years and years and years. And we'll miss him out there. We'll miss him out there. I'm really pleased that I didn't interview him, but he made sure to get me some of his photos too and autographed them very kindly. So that's a little treasure I have, as well as that memory and the memory that we all have. That's just another wacky facet of Star Trek that, because it's series television, that we enjoy, that maybe not all the other Star Wars has finally started to do more movies. But that's one of the special things about Star Trek and its fandom that I really enjoy. Oh, by the way, trivia question. How many of you know, and I think I use this often, where Lieutenant Leslie got his name? It's really weird the way on-set hierarchy sometimes runs in a TV series. And this is something that has not changed across the decades. I mean, Lieutenant Leslie was dubbed that by, in a moment when they needed to yell at him as a name, Connors would not do. And that was just D. He was Shatner's stand-in. So apparently how this is done is Shatner decides the name, or if you're Bill Shatner, you do anyway. Not the lead of all series set aboard spaceships with recurring crew members. But if you're Shatner, of course, you dub your lead-in guy, your stand-in guy, when he's on screen, you dub him with the name of your oldest daughter. Yes. Later, when Eddie had to be, when he left and they needed another stand-in for Shatner, the name of the character became Lemley, which was a combination of all 3 of Shatner's daughters. There you go. Melanie, Elizabeth, and Leslie. Oh, TV trivia, how fun it is. So, gang, you're going to have to do me without visuals this week. The gremlins got my cards. So I think I'm going to have to trust you to know that we have an awesome Patreon group. Patreon.com/TuesdaysLive is how you can support me. I have a very, very simple $5 and $10 program, not a big complicated thing. $5 is the support, $10 is also the support shout out and access to the early editions of our Portal 47 interviews with backstage folks. Never got to have Eddie on as a guest, which bums me out. He's perfect. He's exactly one of the reasons why I created Portal in the first place. And even not all of them get the convention stage exposure that he did. It's all worthwhile that we've got these recording devices. Our Patreon there, though, is one way to support, and I really appreciate it. And guys and gals and peeps, I will get all of you next week, okay? But just very quickly, hey, Tuesdays mean that the Trek Files is out from Roddenberry. You can get that at podcast.roddenberry.com. And our page on Facebook, The Trek Files. This week, it's a name that you've never heard, but John Wentworth was witness to so much Star Trek from the time he was a kid, barely out of college at 23, in 83, all the way through to his retirement from CBS just about 3 or 4 years ago. He saw the ebbs and flows and pendulum swings and so many folks from Gene Roddenberry through Rick Berman, through Alex Kurtzman and J.J. Abrams, all of that, working in promotion and marketing. Wound up as an executive VP and wound up being a huge fan of Star Trek as well. Well, we talk about the time that Star Trek overtook the monkeys in fan mail this week on the Trek Files. It's a lot of fun. Give it a listen. So the Trek Files is out also today. Saturday is going to bring Life Support Live. As you know, Dr. Ali and Dr. Trek, one of us is a real doctor, going boldly through uncertain times. We have a lot of fun. We geek out with Star Trek and look at it through the filter of mental health and daily living. What can we take away from Star Trek while we're having fun with it? That's at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern on Saturdays. I did want to call out that everybody at Roddenberry was very appreciative of the support shown, the Roddenberry Centennial, the Gene 100. The Centennial celebrations continue even as that short-time store at Shop Stands is closed. But all of the Roddenberry share of the profit went to the 350.org to support climate change and awareness and education, and also the Trevor Project, which is intervening to support, and even in crisis situations, the LGBTQ community. So those are like twin good projects that the Roddenberry, that Rod and Trevor and everyone through the Shop Stands profits to for all the great Gene 100 swag that was there. I'm going to be at Salt Lake Comic Con middle of September live, and we just reconfirmed this. The first weekend in October, the 2nd and 3rd, I'm going to be at YumaCon not that one, not the Anime Con in Cleveland with a U in it, with an OU. This is YumaCon as in Yuma, Arizona. It's a small con, but it'll be awesome to get into a part of the country I hadn't been to. 3 hours southwest, right on the border. It'll be awesome in October. That's coming up. There's more things on the way here in Trekland too, but for right now, let me just say thanks everybody for being with me, even when I'm cardless. Never seen me without all the cards. If you want to catch us up elsewhere, it's at Larry Nemechek on Twitter. Otherwise, it's Larry Nemechek's Trekland on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. I know you're watching me over all these Trekland channels right now. Please like and subscribe us on YouTube, whether you're watching there or not. I really got to get those numbers up. And that's going to do it. That's going to do it for us. Just a little Starfleet salute there for Mr. Leslie, Eddie Paskey. It's hard to lose those icons of our history like that. But many, many good years, many, many good memories, and lots of interviews and lots of stories out there and insights. But as for now, everybody, stay healthy. Do all the things. I had 2 tests after Trek Vegas, both of them negative, but I did them. Fully vaccinated. Crazy times out there. Let's get a handle on this and turn the corner, okay? Stay woke. And by that, I mean check your sources. Don't let anybody steer you wrong when it comes to the facts. Stay open-minded because you are a Star Trek fan. And don't be steered wrong. Oh, yes. Trek well, everybody.